Welcome to the debate. This week, we are analyzing what can only be described as a massive strategic move from Valve and Gabe Newell, the new Steam machine. This is a highly customized mini PC, and it's engineered specifically for the living room. It's undeniably aimed at disrupting the console dominance of Xbox and PlayStation.
It really is. And the central question that comes out of all the material is, I think, this real tension between platform strength and, the technical friction points. Is the new Steam machine's success basically guaranteed by the sheer gravitational pull of the Steam ecosystem and the now matured SteamOS? Or will its hardware limitations and these persistent compatibility hurdles stop it from achieving real mainstream adoption?
Exactly. And I'll be arguing that the ecosystem, the strategic pricing, and the maturity of SteamOS make its success highly probable. I'm viewing the hardware constraints as, calculated risks.
And I'll be taking the other side. I see those hardware constraints and technical shortcomings, particularly around compatibility, as potentially fatal obstacles to that mainstream dream.
So the core of my argument is, well, it's simple, really. Valve isn't competing on raw hardware power. They're competing on access and platform value. This is an ecosystem entry device. The foundational strength of the Steam platform is it's staggering. Its active user base has ballooned to a near terrifying 41 million. That's almost a six-fold increase in just over a decade. This existing massive market is hungry for a stable, dedicated living room PC solution. And crucially, the success of the Steam Deck has already validated two things. First, that players will accept a Linux kernel-based OS for gaming, and second, that Valve can actually deliver a streamlined, console-like user experience. And we even have recent technical proof. Tests on identical hardware like the Legion Go confirm that SteamOS often offers superior fluidity compared to Windows 11, even when it's translating games via Proton. So this OS maturity, combined with the plan to price this machine very competitively, maybe even, as some sources say, very cheap, means Valve is selling platform access to an already loyal, vast audience that practically guarantees a market footprint.
I see why you rely so heavily on the ecosystem numbers. And look, they are formidable. I get that. However, I look at Valve's stated goal, to challenge mainstream console dominance, and I find the technical and hardware compromises very difficult to rationalize. If this machine intends to genuinely break into the mass market, it can't just remain a niche product that only appeals to existing enthusiasts.
Okay.
Let's start with performance and longevity. The GPU is stated to be roughly about the level of a PS5. But the selection of 8 gigabytes of VRAM, while I know it was chosen for cost efficiency, it introduces a major point of friction. For a machine targeting 4K 60 FPS, even with upscaling, 8 gigs will not be enough for future AAA titles using high-res textures. We've seen this limitation pop up really quickly on current-gen consoles. But the absolute critical barrier, in my view, is software compatibility. Specifically, the anti-cheat problem. Popular competitive PvP titles, major new entries like Battlefield 6, they rely on kernel-level anti-cheat systems. These systems, they just only function on Windows. This forces complicated dual-boot systems on the user, or, more likely, it just excludes a massive segment of competitive multiplayer gamers entirely. That degree of friction is fatal to any attempt at a true console replacement.
I see your point about the raw VRAM numbers, but I think focusing solely on that 8 gig figure fundamentally misses Valve's design philosophy here. Their focus is on optimization, not maximization. Let me give you a different perspective on how the OS manages that constraint. Valve's system is designed purely for gaming. SteamOS strips away all the computational bloat that's inherent in Windows 11, which has to cater to everything from Office apps, AI assistants, corporate security, you name it.
Sure, it's a leaner OS.
Right. By focusing all its resources on gaming, SteamOS gains this impressive efficiency. It can achieve performance parity or even superiority over Windows-based devices with the same silicon, even with the overhead of Proton. And Proton is that crucial layer allowing Windows games to run smoothly on Linux. So the VRAM constraint is then offset by the strategic use of FSR upscaling. This means Valve is aiming for 4K results without needing raw 4K texture horsepower. And, you mentioned choice being a friction point, but the openness is the key. It allows users to install Windows if they really want to, maintaining that crucial PC freedom, mods, classic games, while offering a reliable host experience for those who just want simplicity.
But that argument for choice, though, I'm sorry, but that just fundamentally misunderstands mass consumer behavior, especially in the console market Valve is trying to capture. Performance parity is useful, yes, but the inescapable technical reality is that anti-cheat issue. The average user migrating from a PS5, they expect to plug and play their favorite competitive titles without having to, partition their hard drive and manage 2 operating systems. But if players can't access the major PvP titles, the very games that keep platform loyalty for millions, without this significant, cumbersome effort, the machine simply cannot replace an Xbox or a PlayStation. The root of the anti-cheat problem is technical. Many of these systems function at the kernel level, requiring deep root access to the OS to stop cheaters. And Linux, just by its design and security framework, makes that integration difficult. So relying on the hope that software translation will solve these fundamental OS dependencies, it's a very precarious strategy for a market challenger. We have to remember the history here. The first Steam machine failed 11 years ago, largely because of poor OS and compatibility issues.
But the distinction between then and now is exactly what Valve's current attempt. 11 years ago, SteamOS was barely functional, driver support was basically non-existent, and Proton was just a dream. Now we have a mature ecosystem validated by the DEC, where almost every mainstream AAA game runs right out of the box. The anti-cheat issue, while it's real, I think it's a shrinking niche of concern. It's a technical licensing headache, sure, but it doesn't represent a systemic failure of the platform. Valve is strategically willing to concede that small segment of the competitive PvP market to ensure the stability, low cost, and immense freedom that the other 95% of their library provides.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the 8 gig VRAM is a minor point, even with FSR upscaling. Let me tell you why it matters for that stability goal you mentioned. The 8 gigs is a major hardware compromise. While Valve claims it was sufficient in their testing, when you pair a GPU that's roughly a desktop 4060 equivalent and you're targeting 4K 60 FPS, the VRAM becomes the bottleneck. FSR needs texture data, and future high-fidelity AAA titles demand massive texture pools, especially at high resolutions. That 8 gig limit is going to force serious texture and setting compromises within 2 to 3 years. That compromises a fundamental goal of being a long-term PC host that solves stability issues. If the hardware forces performance to degrade much sooner than the average 5 to 7 year console cycle, it's going to undermine consumer trust.
I come at it from a different way, focusing on the core longevity solution that Valve is offering, which I think directly addresses your stability critique. Valve's focus is maximizing access and flexibility, not peak raw performance. The VRAM choice was a budgetary one, yes, mitigated by optimization in FSR to make the device accessible, but the injected longevity through PC freedom. You dismiss the DIY elements as cumbersome, but they're crucial for system maintenance and upgrading.
For a certain type of user, maybe.
Well, for example, the machine uses a full-size 2280 NVMe SSD. Console competitors often restrict storage to proprietary, expensive formats. Valve lets the user replace the SSD easily. That extends storage life and reduces cost. Furthermore, the inclusion of a removable front baffle for better cooling, that is an enthusiast-level feature that solves the thermal throttling issues that often plague compact consoles. This lets users actively address heat as new demands arise, extending the viable life of the machine in a way that's just impossible on a sealed PlayStation or Xbox.
But that DIY element, the need to open the device, remove cooling baffles, replace components, while PC loyalists love it, it runs entirely counter to the primary expectation of the average console buyer. That buyer values sealed simplicity over customization. You can't appeal to millions of casual gamers by requiring a screwdriver for maintenance.
That brings us directly to the strategic impact, which I believe is the key differentiator here. The Steam machine's success doesn't require it to outsell the PS5. Its primary role is to drive traffic into the Steam ecosystem, where Valve profits immensely from digital distribution. If this machine hits that very cheap price point, it solves a crucial problem for 2 key audiences. First, existing PC players who want living room stability without building a full rig. Second, console players who want PC freedom, mods, huge discounts, and most importantly, no required membership fees for online play. This model puts enormous, almost existential pressure on Sony and Microsoft to justify their subscription fees. That benefits all consumers.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame the nature of Steam's strategic leverage differently. Valve may win the larger platform war, forcing policy changes, but the machine itself might not be the primary driver. A recent survey showed that a stunning 72% of industry execs view Steam as a monopoly. That dominance stems from its superior service, its library depth, its discounts. In short, its platform offerings. The fear is that a dedicated console PC hybrid risks being overly cumbersome for the average console user, diluting that perceived simplicity. The machine will successfully target those with old hardware or Steam loyalists, yes, but those friction points, the VRAM limit, the anti-cheat problem, they limit its potential to genuinely replace Xbox for the general family or casual user who's just looking for frictionless gaming.
Yet, by offering stability and access to the largest, most cost-effective library of games, Valve is positioning the Steam machine as the most logical and affordable upgrade path for millions of PC players right now. It addresses stability and simplicity for the living room, which is a massive untapped market for PC gaming, and that is its true competitive advantage.
And it is those complex friction points, the hardware compromises like 8 gigs of VRAM, and the critical technical failure of anti-cheat systems that will ultimately determine how deep into the mainstream consumer market it can actually penetrate.
So, to me, the Steam machine is undeniably the culmination of lessons learned from the Steam Deck. It's leveraging a powerful open ecosystem, a mature OS, and calculated low pricing to bring PC freedom and streamlined stability to the living room. Its success is determined not by peak raw specs, but by platform value and ecosystem entry.
And on the other hand, while that ecosystem is powerful and its 41 million users are a massive foundation, the immediate real-world friction points from the hardware, specifically the longevity concerns around the VRAM, and the unavoidable reliance on Windows for key anti-cheat titles, suggest its success is contingent on targeting a sophisticated, specialized audience rather than competing directly for the general console user who just wants absolute simplicity.
And I think the key variable for everyone listening, the final price remains unannounced. That price will ultimately determine whether this device seriously challenges the market giants or, as you say, simply serves its existing loyal fan base.
Absolutely. The source material offers diverse and often contradictory evidence, which really shows the complexity of predicting market adoption when you're blending the closed nature of consoles with the open, flexible architecture of the PC. There's certainly much more to explore within this fascinating release.